Hi, this is Miss Wright, and I am going to go over the people, places, and events for stage two of Great Expectations. So I'm going to start with Pip, and the first thing I have for Pip is that he is both the protagonist and the antagonist. And the reason that I put antagonist is because you'll see that during stage two, Pip gets in his own way a lot. So he causes problems for himself. He has challenges that he has to overcome in stage two that are of his own making. And when you cause conflicts for yourself, you are both the antagonist and the protagonist. London is the setting. So he arrives in London. Does he like it? He's actually very disappointed by London. He describes it as being kind of dirty and gloomy and overcrowded. So it is not at all what he hoped it would be. He meets Mr. Jaggers again there. Mr. Jaggers is going to be in charge of his finances. And when he needs money, he'll have to come and speak to Mr. Jaggers, and then Mr. Wemmick will get him the cash. Mr. Wemmick is a clerk, one of four in Mr. Jaggers' office, and Mr. Wemmick, over the course of stage two, becomes a good friend of Pip. They're able to talk together freely. Pip even goes and visits him at his private home. Pip will live in Barnard's Inn, which, when he gets there, is also quite disappointing. He says that it looks like more of a home for tomcats than for people, so it's a really rundown, third-rate hotel, and it's very sparsely furnished because Herbert has been living there, and Herbert doesn't have much money, and furniture is being brought in as Pip is arriving to because Herbert doesn't have a lot of extra furniture, so they have to bring things in for Pip. Herbert is Matthew Pocket's son, and Herbert and Pip realize that they know each other from stage one, where they fought in the backyard of Miss Havisham's house, and they had that little boxing match where Pip knocks Herbert out. When they see each other, there's no animosity or antagonism. They once they realize their mutual identities, they laugh about it and become quick friends. Handel is the nickname that Herbert gives Pip because he doesn't like his formal name Philip, so he decides that he's going to name him Handel after a composer who wrote a uh, musical piece called The Harmonious Blacksmith. Miss Havisham, meanwhile, back home, Miss Havisham is still a recluse in her house. Uh, Pip ends up going back to see Miss Havisham, but before he does that, Herbert tells Pip that he knows some of Miss Havisham's story. So they have a very interesting first night dinner together, where Herbert reveals Miss Havisham's backstory, and that in fact, when she was younger, 25 years ago, uh, she was engaged to a fiance who jilted her. He abandoned her on the morning of her wedding at 20 minutes to 9. She receives a letter saying that he's not showing up, and that the whole thing was a setup from her brother, Arthur Havisham, who is actually her half brother, and who resented her and hated her because she was the favorite of their father. They have different mothers, but the same father. And this brother hated her so much that he hired this man to pretend to love her, to romance her, to propose marriage to her, and also to buy Arthur out of his brewery so that Arthur could get money, and then on the ruse that once they married, he would run the brewery, and then on the day of the wedding everything collapses. So actually this part of the story humanizes Miss Havisham, quite a bit because we find out why she is in this dilapidated state that she's allowed herself to fall into. And we see that she must have been kind of a very fragile person, or a person who was truly defeated and destroyed by this incident. She just wasn't able to emotionally recoup. So when she finds out that she's not only lost her fiance, but the whole thing was an ultimate betrayal, also by her half brother, and that this plot had gone on for quite a while, it just pulls the foundation from under her life, and she's not able to just get back to normal. She secludes herself for a long time, and then eventually contacts Mr. Jaggers and says that she wants some company, and that is how Estella comes to live with Miss Havisham. So it's really, if you look between the lines, read between the lines, it's a very compelling story there, and there's a certain amount of pathos associated with that story because it really humanizes Miss Havisham. Compassin is the name of the fiance. I'm not sure that we were told that, but in stage 3, when you hear the name Compassin, that is the name of the fiance who betrayed and jilted Miss Havisham. Matthew Pocket is Herbert's father, and he lives in Hammersmith. He's the father of at least 5 or 6 children, and his wife is Belinda Pocket. She is a child of aristocratic parents who have a title but no money to back it up. And she's very into the genealogy that shows who her ancestors are, and she spends a great deal of the day reading about that, to the neglect of her children, who Pip describes as tumbling up. They're not being brought up, they're being tumbled up because they run around and they fall over each other all day long. The maids chase them, and the maids end up tumbling after them also. The maids pretty much run the household, and they seem like the only adults in the household. And the servants appear to take some advantage of the family in that the good food goes missing. They help themselves to all the best food, and then when company comes, there's not enough food for the company. Um, Drummle and Startop are 2 students of Mr. Pocket who live with at the Pocket residence. Pip decides that he won't live there. Drummle is described in the most unflattering terms. Pip takes an immediate dislike to him. He is very boorish, very cheap, very mean-spirited, selfish man, and he's kind of the quintessential spoiled aristocratic Englander of this time. Startop is a much more humble figure. He was raised by a single mother, and he has a much softer personality. Pip describes him as having feminine features. We don't know exactly what that's supposed to mean. And Pip and Startop eventually do become good friends in stage 3. The Pocket relatives come in and out of the house on occasion, and they watch Pip when he's there studying and being tutored by Mr. Matthew Pocket. And they write letters back to Miss Havisham disparaging Pip. They don't care for him, and they want to put a breach between Miss Havisham and Pip because they think that Miss Havisham must be the reason why Pip has had a rise in the world. And I think they're pretty certain that she's spending the money on him that they want to inherit from her someday. Molly is Mr. Jagger's housekeeper, and she becomes an important character only because he keeps drawing attention to her wrists. During the dinner, he asks her to show her wrists to the people at the dinner table, and she is quite mortified by this. And Eventually, she is compelled to do so, and we see that at least one of her wrists has a lot of lacerations, a lot of scars on it, and this will become important in stage 3. We're going to find out what is the mystery of Molly and these scars. At that same dinner party, Drummle was there, Matthew was there, Startup was there. They end up having an argument about Drummle's character. He feels free to borrow money from his friends while having complete contempt for them. He looks down on them. He thinks that they're stupid and ignorant. And Pip tries to point out to him that it's quite hypocritical to borrow money from people at the same time that you have no respect for those people. Okay. Meanwhile, back home in Kent, we have Joe, Biddy, and Mrs. Joe. So during stage 2, uh, Joe comes for a visit. And I believe that is chapter 27 when Joe comes for a visit. And it's one of the sadder chapters in stage 2 because Pip is so reluctant to have Joe there. And while Joe is there, he's not exactly a gracious host. And by the end of that chapter, Joe says that he understands that they are not two people to be seen together in London, and he takes all the blame for himself for coming and intruding in Pip's life, and he says that Pip should just remember him as the blacksmith in his leather apron, and if he remembers him that way, that he'll have a better opinion of him. Joe's words end up cutting to Pip's heart, and Pip feels terribly guilty. When he tries to go after Joe to apologize, Joe has already vanished from sight, and Pip can't find him. So look back on chapter 27. It's a very important chapter. Biddy is there taking care of Mrs. Joe until Mrs. Joe finally dies of the long-term effects of her assault in stage 1. And they have a funeral, which Pip does attend. He gets a letter and he does attend it. And he talks to Joe. The funeral is both serious and comic because obviously it's about death and Joe's grief, but Mr. Trabb is there and he's orchestrating the events of the funeral, and it is obvious that it is far too elaborate a funeral for Joe's comfort. Joe would have just liked to take his wife to the graveyard and have a nice, simple ceremony, but they're made to wear these elaborate funeral costumes and walk around with uh, handkerchiefs, black handkerchiefs on their heads, and handkerchiefs at their nose or their eyes for signs of grief, and it's much more than Joe ever wanted. Okay, I'm going to stop here and then continue in a second part with the mysterious stranger and other characters from stage 2. See you on the next video.